All right. Hello, business writing students. This video lecture is going to kind of pick up where I left off with the last one, talking about cover letters and emails and things like that. So some of this is going to be similar, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. So let's go ahead and start with this idea of bringing it all together. And again, I would encourage you, if you have questions on any of this, please do let me know. So let's, again, we went into details on the email, the cover letter, the resume in the last video lecture, but just for the sake of argument, the things that we worked on this quarter, the things that come to the top of my mind as the most salient, the most important, are talking about the writing process. And although we didn't have really a specific assignment connected to this, I would encourage you to continue to think about the writing process and what writing process works best for you. In the writing process video lecture, I talked about the ways in which writing process is different for different people, and sometimes it varies depending on task. So continue to think about that process of brainstorming, drafting, writing, editing, revising. We also talked about writing business emails, which helped us think about audience and purpose. We looked at job posts and thought about the ways in which we can figure out whether or not we fit with a job and what the keywords might be based on those job posts. Now, again, with this final job application packet, you will need to go back and reread that job post. And unless you decide to change, which again, you're more than welcome to do. We talked about creating a resume, which requires thinking back and thinking about the past and things that are important and how we can tailor that resume. And then we were working on a cover letter most recently and thinking about how the resume and the cover letter can really work together. Now, for the job application packet in particular, I want to kind of take some time to talk about how all of those things will work together. As I've said before, writing is very rarely done in isolation. These things work together. But the last thing that we want to do is have a cover letter that is simply the resume and a resume that is simply the email. That's going to waste a lot of time, and they're probably not going to look at all three. In fact, if you write a good email and a good resume, they may not need your cover letter, but it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, especially for those jobs that are going to require a cover letter anyway. So what is the job application packet? So it's a fairly simple, fairly straightforward, and again, up to you exactly how you want to approach this, but I'm going to give you the basics that I want to see. So what it is, so a clear and specific job posting, again, you can use the exact same one that you used earlier in this quarter, or you are welcome to choose a new job if you would like. In either case, you'll need to go back and reread it. You're going to revise and tailor your resume. So you should be using my comments on your resume in order to make that stronger, but also think about taking your resume to the Writing Learning Studio or having a friend look at it or printing it out and rereading it. There are a lot of sort of little details that I catch when I print something out. And just as an aside, if I haven't mentioned it before, one of my favorite strategies is to change the font to a font that I don't care for. For me, that's Comic Sans, and print out that document. This helps trick my brain into looking for the mistakes that are actually there. You're going to create a clear, revised, and tailored cover letter, again, based on my feedback and your own revisions. And then you are going to create an email tailored to that specific job. And we'll talk about this more too as we move on into the latter part of this video lecture. But I want to talk about, so we talked about what the job application packet is, but now I want to talk about why we're ending here. And maybe this is intuitive, but just for the sake of argument, so that we're all on the same page, I do want to make it very clear why I chose to structure the quarter this way. So the first one is because revision is an important part of the writing process, and going back to a piece of writing, incorporating somebody else's feedback is important and essential, and something we do in business all the time. In my professional capacity at Shoreline, I am often getting edits from different people on different things. That could be a flyer for a class, that could be an email to a group of people, whatever it is. I will seek out people who can help me clarify and make sure the wording is right. Or even if it's a personal email, but an important email, I'll have my wife read it just to make sure that the tone, the information, the clarity is all there. Doing this type of writing obviously also speaks to that idea of specificity, clarity, and concision. Are we getting our message across as clearly as possible, as specifically as possible, in the fewest possible words? This task, especially with the resume and the cover letter, allows us to represent ourselves. Now, in the short term, that's to get a job, but in the future, that may mean representing the company that we're working for. Companies will often have somebody who checks or moderates information that goes out to the general public. But as we talked about with emails, any email that we're sending in a business or professional capacity, we should be thinking that this could be read by somebody outside of the company, the corporation, the business, which means we still need to be comporting ourselves or representing ourselves in a professional capacity. And then lastly, and I've already talked about this, business communication is very rarely done in isolation. A lot of the time, those specific things are dovetailed together or connected together. Okay, so the what and the why. So the other important part then is how. So how to approach the job application packet. Again, up to you is in terms of how you approach it, because I'm only going to see what revisions you've done, whatever you submit as that final assignment. But the first thing that I would say as far as how to approach it is to decide whether or not you're going to use the same job posting or new one, right? If you're going to use the same one, reread it. Again, up to you. Focus on the resume next. To me, it makes sense to build in this direction. So you could do this in a different order, but to my mind, this is the most logical way to do it. Once I have that job posting, I've tailored my resume for that job posting. I've made revisions based on feedback. Then I can say, okay, now I want to go to my cover letter. And if I've made any changes to my resume, I'm also going to need to take that into account with my cover letter. So a good way to do this is highlight or track your changes on your resume. And once you make those, go and compare it to your cover letter before you start making any other changes. Make revisions based on feedback. But again, remember, your cover letter and your resume, they work together. So you need to make sure that there's overlap, but that it's not simply rehashing or saying exactly the same thing. And then the last thing is to consider who you would be emailing about the job. Again, is it a specific person? Do you know their name? Or is it a big corporation and you're emailing the HR manager or something like that? Again, if it's just HR, they are still a representative of that corporation. Your email should be short and sweet. You should consider who you want to include on that particular email, right? Who are you going to address it to? We talked about this earlier in the quarter with emails. And then don't rehash your cover letter or resume. We'll talk more about that inquiry type email in another video lecture, but I want you to be thinking about how they all work together because they have different purposes. In a nutshell, think about it in terms of the email is the first thing that hiring manager is going to see. That sets the tone, right? If the email isn't good, it doesn't necessarily matter how good your resume or your cover letter are because they might stop there. So if there are typos, spelling errors, accuracy issues, or you simply haven't shown that you're a good fit, then it's kind of all for naught. So the email gets you in the door, right? So that opens the door. Then they're probably going to look at your resume next, unless they have software that's going to skim that for keywords. So then your resume needs to all be in place. And then if they're still interested, they'll probably move on to your cover letter. And that's where they're going to learn more about you. It's going to answer some other questions. It's going to highlight who you are personally. So again, I would do it in that order. I think some folks have the tendency to say, well, the email is the shortest and maybe the easiest, so I'll start there, and then I'll do the resume, and then I'll do the cover letter. I think the problem there is that we're not thinking about how these things work together. So I'd really, really encourage you to think of them as three pieces to the same puzzle. And then if we remove one, that puzzle won't make sense. Maybe a better analogy would be a house of cards, right? And, if I have all the pieces there, each one relies upon another. And if I remove one, I've now unsettled the stability or integrity of that house of cards. All right, so there you go. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, jokes, memes, or recipes, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll talk to you all later.